Trump terrified the deep state and the national security establishment. So did Brexit. There's a sense in which you had a guy on here named Peter Zion who wrote this book called this really apocalyptic book about how the world is going to fall apart. And his whole argument, which I don't agree with, I think he's brilliant, but I think the argument's wrong. His whole argument is based on the idea that the United States is going to stop providing military security to our allies in Asia and Europe. It's all just based on this assumption that Trump is the beginning of the U.S. withdrawing from its traditional role since World War II. There's a bunch of people who obviously their ideology, their livelihoods, their identity, just their whole way of life is tied up with providing the United States providing this protection for Europe and Asia, and they viewed Trump as threatening that. I also think they just really hated the guy. They looked down on him. He was crude and all the things that people don't like about him.
And he spoke disparagingly about the intelligence community.
Yeah. I mean,
which is crazy.
Absolutely. He was against the war in Iraq. He was different. He was a nationalist Republican. And what's so interesting is that, if you read people like, people on the left, like Noam Chomsky and others who have been critics of U.S. or Glenn Greenwald, who are critics of, and I think Matt Taibbi, critics of U.S. government, military invasions around the world since World War II. I mean, we've overthrown many governments, right? Iran, Chile, Guatemala, and what the pattern is that these are places where nationalists, sometimes socialists, but often just nationalists who are trying to control their economies and they didn't want foreign interference, were coming to power. And the U.S. government would see that as a threat to providing, to having this liberal global order, as it's called. And so they saw Trump as an existential threat to this post-war liberal order, and they needed to, they viewed social media as the means to his power, which I think was exaggerated. So on the one hand, they saw a threat. I think they also saw an opportunity. The war on terror, we won. I mean, huge victory. I mean, it's shocking how successful it was in some ways. So you have a bunch of people that suddenly need something to do. So there's a lot of motivations there. And then you also have the guys that lost the Hillary campaign. John Podesta, he was her chair of her campaign. He runs the most powerful, progressive, frankly, propaganda organization in the world, or at least in the United States, the Center for American Progress. They were looking also for some reason, someone to blame for their own failures, for the dislikability of Hillary. And so there was just a lot of motivations to try to get control over social media platforms. They felt like they had lost control of them.
And what was the attitude of these social media platforms when they were exchanging emails back and forth with these intelligence agencies? Was there any understanding of the implications of allowing this web of influence to infiltrate and control narratives, and how kind of creepy and dangerous that is? Did they understand how other people would perceive that? Because I would assume this is all the emails were exchanged, and there was Slack messages, and all this stuff is recorded, right? So there's a record of it.
Yeah.
Did they have an understanding of how other people would view this?
Yeah, I mean, just to back up even further, so there's two interesting dynamics going on. The first is that the internet itself is created by the U.S. Department of Defense, and Google is a spinoff of Defense Department projects. So on the one hand, the internet is a function of the U.S. military. I mean, it's a spinoff of the U.S. military. It's a great one. We're glad to have it. But I think the U.S. military and the deep state and whatever, they felt like they had control over the internet until Trump, basically, or really maybe until ISIS around 2014, 2015. That's the first dynamic. The second dynamic is culturally, Silicon Valley is libertarian, right? So you have the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You have a libertarian ethos. Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, is very much a manifestation of that libertarian ethos. Mark Zuckerberg less. But even Mark Zuckerberg, after the 2016 elections, when everyone's accusing him of throwing the election to Trump, he's like, this is ridiculous. He's like, our own data doesn't support. There just wasn't enough. The Russians clearly did not have this influence. They just beat the crap out of him so much and threatened to take away their ability to operate, which is known as Section 230, which is this, huge liability protection in the law that passed in 1996, which allows Google, Facebook, Twitter to exist.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
When you say they threatened to take it, like, in what way?
Directly.
Directly.
Including Biden himself. I mean, but basically Democratic politicians, they would just say, we're going to remove your Section 230 status. That's just like saying we're going to destroy your company. I mean, it's not.
And they were saying this because their assertion was that Russian disinformation and propaganda led to Donald Trump being elected.
Yes.
Being elected. And there was no evidence of this.
No, I mean, there was some evidence of it, but nothing.
Well, there was certainly evidence of like these troll farms.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, we know they exist.
Yes. Yeah, but it's trivial.